So there's a woman in central New Jersey who spent 9 years as the only person standing between a pharmaceutical company and the FDA shutting them down. Not making the drugs, but making sure the building was allowed to exist. The founder's daughter rolled in from a luxury beauty brand, saw her $9 lab coat, and decided she was the problem. I need you to stay to the end for my take on this one, and I can't wait to see yours in the comments. My name is Catalin Varga. For 9 years, I was the Senior Quality Assurance Manager at Aldrich Generics, a family-founded pharmaceutical manufacturer in central New Jersey, producing 6 FDA-approved generic medications across 3 manufacturing lines. My name, my actual legal name, was on the FDA Drug Establishment registration as the facility's responsible person. Every batch release bore my signature. Every annual product review went through my hands. Every deviation report, every corrective action, every out-of-specification investigation closed with my initials. I do not say this to impress you. I say it because no one at that company understood what any of those words meant. When I say I manage the deviation system, I mean I built a cross-referencing methodology that mapped every deviation to its root cause, its corrective action, and every downstream process it touched, going back 7 years. The index structure was mine. The search logic was mine. The ability to pull up every particulate excursion on line 2 and trace it through cleaning validation records to the specific gasket replacement that resolved it, that was mine. I also maintained what we internally called the readiness binder. 412 pages of inspection preparation documentation organized by FDA Form 483 observation categories from the previous 3 inspections. When an FDA investigator walked through our door, that binder told me what they would ask before they asked it. Every Tuesday, I ran a standing review of our drug master files. 3 of our 6 products had stability data I had personally generated during their original filings, dissolution testing, chromatogram review, signed stability summaries. Those data packages were built on my bench work. On a Tuesday in March, I was updating the readiness binder for a pre-approval inspection scheduled 11 weeks out. New product, new API supplier. The kind of inspection where an FDA investigator goes through UR documentation molecule by molecule. That was the morning I heard the name Sloan Aldrich for the first time. Sloan Aldrich was the CEO's daughter. This was not a secret. It was Aldrich Generics, and her father, Gerald, had founded the company in 1998. What was a surprise was her title, Chief Transformation Officer, and her background. 5 years at a luxury beauty brand in Manhattan, managing what her LinkedIn called brand narrative architecture and consumer-facing ecosystem design. She arrived on a Monday in a silk blouse and heels that clicked on the epoxy flooring of the manufacturing corridor like a metronome counting down. Her first all hands was a masterpiece of vapor. We are entering a new chapter, she told us, standing in front of a slide deck with gradient backgrounds and no data. Aldrich needs to lean into its identity as a modern pharmaceutical partner. We are going to streamline operations, modernize our visual ecosystem, and build a brand story that positions us for the next phase of growth. 32 people who manufactured medications for a living, being told about brand stories. Her first initiative was facility aesthetics, new signage, new lobby furniture, new lab coats, branded, from a luxury uniform vendor, embroidered logos, tailored cuts, a specific shade of blue she called Aldrich Azure. It was in the elevator, 3 weeks after her arrival. I was heading to Building C in my standard issue coat, white polyester cotton blend, $9 from the approved garment vendor, validated under our contamination control strategy. Sloan was with a woman I did not recognize, and as I stepped in, she glanced at my coat and said to her companion, loud enough to land, "Someone should tell her this is not a costume party." I was standing 3 feet away. The doors had not closed. I said nothing. I watched the floor numbers change. The following week, I received a memo directing all QA staff to transition to the new branded coats by month's end. I walked to Sloan's office, the first and only time I went to her voluntarily. "The current coats are specified in our cleaning validation protocol," I said. "Changing the garment material, fiber composition, or vendor requires a revalidation study filed under 21 CFR Part 211. Particulate shedding from a new textile could affect our environmental monitoring data. We are 11 weeks from a pre-approval inspection." She looked at me the way you look at someone who has just explained traffic law to you when you asked what color to paint the car. "Catalin," she said, "I think you are overcomplicating a wardrobe update." That was when I knew. 6 weeks later, I was called to a meeting room on the second floor. Sloan was there with Gerald's longtime HR director, Patricia, who would not look at me. "Catalin, we have been evaluating alignment across the leadership team," Sloan said. She had a folder in front of her, but never opened it. "The transformation process requires people who can move at the pace of the organization's evolution. Your approach to quality assurance, while thorough, does not align with where we are headed." Thorough. She said thorough the way someone says moist. "We are restructuring the QA function to be more integrated with our brand and operational strategy. We have decided to move in a different direction." Patricia slid a separation agreement across the table. Standard severance. Standard non-disparagement. Nothing unusual. Nothing generous. I read it. Every clause. "I understand," I said. Sloan's shoulders dropped by half an inch. She had been braced for something. "Of course," I added. "Do you need me to brief anyone on the inspection readiness status?" "We will handle the transition internally," she said. "The team is fully capable." "Of course they are." I signed the agreement. I went back to my desk. I spent 45 minutes doing what looked like packing, but was actually something more precise. I backed up my personal methodology notes for the cross-reference system, written on my own time in my own notation. Not company property. Mine. I forwarded 3 personal contacts to my personal email: a retired FDA investigator, a regulatory attorney, and the API supplier's quality director, who had worked with me on the Drug Master file. I put my $9 lab coat in my bag. No one asked for it. Patricia walked me to the lobby. She whispered, "I am sorry," at the door. I told her it was fine. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 4 minutes. I looked at the building where I had spent 9 years making sure every molecule that left it was documented, tested, and legal. Then I drove to the garden center. It was the first Tuesday in 3 years I had not spent reviewing a Drug Master file. I bought tomato seedlings instead. If you've ever explained something critical to someone who smiled and called it overcomplicating, you already know where this is going. Hit subscribe because every story on this channel is about the moment the complicated thing turns out to be the only thing that matters. The first call came 9 days later. Deepa, one of my QA associates, trying to sound casual. Hey, Kat, quick question. Do you remember where the environmental monitoring trend data is cross-referenced in the readiness binder? I am looking at the index, and it does not match what I am seeing in the system. It would not match. I had built a secondary reference layer on top of the company's standard document management system because the standard structure was insufficient for how FDA investigators actually request documentation. Without my login credentials, deactivated the day I left, the search logic defaulted to the base system. My layer was gone. I do not think I should be advising on that, Deepa. You should talk to whoever is managing the inspection readiness now. Silence. No one is managing it, Kat. Sloan said she would assign it. I planted tomatoes, 3 varieties, Roma, Cherokee Purple, and a brandy wine that I had been meaning to try for years. The soil in my backyard had too much clay, so I built raised beds. It was the slowest my hands had moved in 9 years, and they were steady. The second call came 3 weeks later from a number I did not recognize. The contract lab handling our stability testing, calling to confirm whether the 6-month pull for the new product's accelerated stability study should proceed. They had been unable to reach anyone at Aldrich who could authorize the protocol. The stability pull had to happen within a 7-day window. Miss it, and the data point is void. Void the data point, and the filing timeline shifts by 6 months. I did not return the call. That one kept me up. My hand was on the phone at 11:30, dialing the first 4 digits before I set it down. 9 years of instinct screaming that a missed stability pull is not something you let happen to a drug application you built with your own hands. But I was not their quality manager anymore. Sloan had made that clear. The FDA pre-approval inspection arrived on schedule. 11 weeks, exactly as I had told Sloan. What I heard afterward, from Deepa, from the API supplier's quality director, from industry contacts, was systematic. Investigators requested the deviation history for line 2. No one could locate the cross-referenced corrective actions. The readiness binder had not been updated since my departure. Environmental monitoring trends were filed under the base system and did not correspond to the format investigators expected. 3 hours in, the lead investigator asked who the facility's responsible person was. The answer was still my name. No one had filed the update. The inspection lasted 4 days. FDA issued a warning letter citing 12 observations. The pre-approval application was placed on refuse to file status. In my garden, the Cherokee purples were starting to set fruit. The board hired outside counsel within a week of the warning letter. Sullivan and March, a regulatory defense firm out of Philadelphia I had seen across the table at 2 previous inspections. They were expensive and they were good and they knew exactly who to call. Their senior partner, David Sullivan, reached me on a Thursday. Ms. Varga, I will be direct. We have been retained by Aldrich Generics to address an FDA warning letter. The board has authorized us to engage a regulatory affairs consultant to reconstruct the compliance documentation. Your name was the only name that came up. Unanimously. I quoted him 4 times my previous salary, billed hourly. He did not hesitate. I walked back into Building C on a Monday morning in a charcoal suit and a consulting firm's lanyard. Not an Aldrich badge, not an employee. A billable expert at $475 an hour. The conference room had 7 people. 3 board members, Patricia from HR, 2 of Sullivan's associates, and Sloan. Her silk blouse was wrinkled. When I entered, her face did something I will describe clinically. The muscles around her eyes contracted, and her posture shifted 2 inches backward. Recognition followed by recalculation. David Sullivan opened. Ms. Varga has been retained to assess the scope of the compliance remediation. Catalin, the floor is yours. I did not look at Sloan. I opened my laptop. The warning letter cites 12 observations. 9 of them trace directly to documentation gaps created in the 8 weeks between my departure and the inspection. But the board should understand something that is not in the warning letter. I pulled up the Drug Master files. 3 of your 6 approved products, lisinopril, metformin ER, and amlodipine, are filed with stability data that I personally generated. My benchwork, my signatures. The cross-reference system connecting those stability profiles to your annual product reviews was my system. Without it, your next annual product review cycle, due in 90 days, cannot demonstrate continued compliance with your approved specifications. The room was very quiet. If those reviews cannot be completed, FDA can initiate a compliance action, putting those 3 products at risk of market withdrawal. That is not 12 observations. That is 60% of your product portfolio. Gerald Aldrich, who had been silent until now, turned to his daughter. Sloan, step outside. She stood. She smoothed her blouse. She walked to the door without a word. Eerie compliance. Turns out it runs in the family. The remediation took 14 weeks. I rebuilt the cross-reference system, reconstructed the readiness documentation, and prepared the formal response to the warning letter. Sullivan and March's invoice for my services alone was $380,000. My old annual salary had been $94,000. The FDA accepted the remediation. The warning letter was closed. The 3 at-risk products remained on the market. The private equity acquisition Sloan had been grooming the company for collapsed. The warning letter tanked the valuation by 40%, and the PE firm walked. Gerald issued a press release about leadership restructuring. Sloan was given an advisory title with no direct reports and no operational authority. She left 5 months later. Her LinkedIn now says she is exploring entrepreneurial opportunities in the wellness space. No one in New Jersey Pharma returns her calls. I was offered a permanent position at Aldrich. I declined. I took a director of regulatory affairs role at a larger manufacturer, one that had tried to recruit me twice before. Better title, better salary, better systems. I built a new cross-reference methodology on my first day. This time I wrote a training manual. I still grow tomatoes. The brandy wines were worth the wait. Some people have asked me why I went back to help Aldrich at all. I could have let the products get pulled. I could have let the whole thing collapse. Those were patients' medications. That was never a question. Whether it should have been, that is a different conversation. So here's what gets me about this one. This is my take. Sloan looked at a $9 lab coat in an elevator and thought she understood the person wearing it. That's the whole story right there. She did not know what a drug master file was. She didn't know her company's name was on an FDA registration with someone else's signature holding it up. She saw a wardrobe problem. Caitlin saw a 21 CFR Part 211. And when the FDA showed up, they did not ask about Aldrich Azor. They asked about the deviation log. That is always how it goes. The people who talk about optics never see what is actually holding the building up until it's not there anymore. Now, do you agree with her going back? Some of you are saying she should have let them drown. Some of you are saying the patient argument settles it. Drop your take in the comments. I have seen some of you write responses longer than the script, and I'm here for it. Next story is on screen. Tap it. And if you're not subscribed, fix that. This is where competence gets the last word.